This is important. The Israeli Mossad, their secret commando forces, are training Kurdish forces. The Mossad and Israeli army are in a heavily guarded base in northern Iraq. That was the situation in 2005. I did not find any resources to say that it's gone or still there. The Israelis are training the Peshmerga, that's the name for the Kurdish militias. And they're doing it through private military companies, again, on the sly, so it all looks kosher, if you will. The Israeli security firm called Interop has 2 subsidiaries that it uses for its Iraq work, but they are registered in Switzerland. So they say they have Swiss companies there. This is from a BBC report. And Danny Atam, one of the co-founders of that security firm Interop, stayed as its chairman until 2003, was a former director of the Mossad, and then also served in the Knesset. So you can see that the door is open, just as it is in Israel, as it is here, between the CIA and secret operations and the government. Now, why would the Mossad be training the Peshmerga? The Israelis and the Kurds have long time been allied with one another. Before the invasion in 2003, the Kurds were being used as like a fifth column to oppose Saddam Hussein. Now, the Peshmerga, of course, the Kurdish leadership supported the invasion of Iraq, and the Peshmerga joined U.S. forces as part of the invasion. They continue to occupy provinces way below where the predominance of Kurds are, which they call now Kurdistan, but still north of Baghdad, but more southern provinces than in what's called Kurdistan. And what's being reported, of course not on CNN or ABC News, are massive human rights abuses and killings against non-Kurdish Iraqis. And this is something we don't get also from the media. We know Sunni, Shia, and Kurd. That's all we know. Don't give us more than 3. We can keep track of 3. But you've got all kinds of histories there in Iraq: Turkmen, Chaldeans, Assyrians, Shabaks, Yazidis, Arabs, and more. So a big reason that the Peshmerga are being trained by the Mossad is that they supported the invasion. But another important reason to look at is that the Israelis, who have been really gunning for hitting Iran, can use northern Iraq as home base. Now, if you look at this map, I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer, but towards your left at the screen, you can see Israel, and the big yellow is Iran. See Tehran, look how far away it is, very far. But if you want to refuel, northern Iraq is a nice spot for them to refuel. In the United States, under the Bush administration, they said, okay, we're going to talk about Iraq over here, and then Israel, Palestine over here, and then we will have another discussion about Syria over here. It's really, they're all very close together. It's all related. The Israelis have a National Urban Training Center, and this is an article from the Marine Corps Times in 2007. Built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Well, so were the levees in New Orleans, so hopefully they did a better job for them. And this is funded by U.S. military aid. You paid for it. You paid for it. American Marine, in 2007, this article said U.S. Marines were to train there soon. As of an update in February 2009, they're training there. The IDF is training for 4 theaters: Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank, and Syria. You see, constantly there is a threat of expanding borders. And at this time, 2007, they were training with the reasonable likelihood of another war on Israel's northern front, perhaps by summer's end, according to some intelligence estimates here. Now, what we saw in December of 2008 through January of 2009 was not the northern front. It was Operation Cast-led, the assault, the massacres in Gaza. Now, this training center has a cemetery that they're very proud. It doubles as a soccer field, depending on the operational scenario. Now, this strikes particularly painful for me, because I've seen this picture from Dar Jamail in Fallujah. This was a soccer field that had to be converted to a mass cemetery because when people went to go bury their dead, they got shot at by snipers. The cemetery is on the outside of town. So they converted the soccer field to a cemetery. With great sympathy, when we saw this clip on the news, my father said, this image right here, this is what Cindy Sheehan's son died for. You see, because this is Jalal Talabani. the president of Iraq, Mahmoud Abbas, the still accepted by the United States leader of Palestine, though his term has expired, and Ehud Barak, who is current defense minister. You're not going to see this picture with Saddam Hussein or with a leader of Hamas. But this is quote unquote cooperation, but in the Arab world it's called collaboration. The Mossad are conducting assassinations in Iraq, and this is how you destroy a society so that it cannot rebuild. You get rid of the academics. You get rid of the people who think. It was very powerful to hear Richard Gage yesterday and see the number of scientists coming out of the woodwork now, finding out the truth and standing by the truth. They would all be, all be targeted for assassination in Iraq as academics who are speaking out. Over 350, this is from 2006, over 350 Iraqi scientists and more than 200 academics have been murdered by Mossad with US forces. First, the US comes to them and says, hey, you want to work with us in the United States? Only very few would accept that offer. So a lot of them become refugees fleeing for their lives, or they get killed. And this is how Iraq cannot move forward. So Zionist influence guiding our foreign policy, not in our interest. So as I told you, Israel occupies Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and most importantly to us, the United States Congress. Now, why do I say that? Because of how much money goes towards supporting Zionist policies. I'm going to give you an example, and this is from back before the 2008 election in this country. The largest single donor to the Democratic Party was a man named Haim Saban. He became a billionaire through violence. His company, Saban Entertainment, made the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So he made a lot of money like that. And he has a center named after him, Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution, which is understood to be a more conservative think tank in Washington. Big supporter, big cheerleader for invading Iraq. And so Haim Saban says, well, I'm a one-issue guy, and my issue is Israel. Good for you. Go with God. Do whatever you like, but that doesn't mean that you should be able to use money to guide American foreign policy towards your issue. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, this is one of the strongest lobbies in Washington, and I'm going to show you what one of the pieces of legislation they've pushed through. Jeffrey Blankford, who's a journalist and a Middle East analyst and also Jewish, says, why so much money? How is so much money going to Congress? The reason that the pro-Israel lobby has to give so much more money to the politicians than the other lobbies, such as arms manufacturers, oil, etc., is that supporting Israel is arguably not in the U.S. interest from any perspective, and the contributions are necessary to buy the politicians' cooperation. If I call my congressperson and I say, look, soldiers are coming home with PTSD, suicide rates for them are at epidemic proportions, highest since Vietnam, over 1 million Iraqis are dead, I want the occupation to end, thank you so much for your call. And if someone else comes in from another lobby and says, look, I want the troops to stay there, and here's a check for $10 million, who are they going to listen to? The Zionist influence on U.S. policy, they pushed in this country, the Zionist neoconservatives, the neocons here, pushed for invading Iraq, and the same people pushed and continue to push to hit Iran. This is not in anybody's interest to strike Iran. Iraq was a country of 26 million that had been starved by economic sanctions for 13 years and completely disarmed. Iran is a country of 70 million that's well-fed and capable of defending itself. You want to go mess with them, you're going to have a problem. In the book by Mearsheimer and Walt, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy, Israel is targeting Iran. And again, Douglas Feith and David Wormser, those names come up as those individuals who are pushing for an assault on Iran. Israel needs, now why don't they just go ahead? Because they need U.S. collaboration on Iran. First of all, now when I read this, I was like, people, they need American permission to use Iraqi airspace. In the new democracy of Iraq, with all its sovereignty, the Israelis need American permission to use Iraqi airspace.